Alright, welcome to the science special. The science special I'm doing where I'm looking at rain. Because I was just thinking, right, what makes it rain, like where does rain come from, right? I seem to remember, like, on them few occasions I thought about it years ago. There's basically there was something in the back of my head that said about, it comes with the clouds. Like the clouds absorb moisture, right? Like in this sort of diagram, right? Yeah, the clouds absorb moisture, right, and then basically rain down, right. It's a bit like a sponge, I suppose, right. The clouds act as sponges, soak up some moisture, right, from somewhere, right, and then rain it down, right. As you can see here in this, what do you call it, picture? It's basically saying that the water is soaked up, right, in that manner from the ground level, I suppose you call it, right, groundwater and surface water, and there goes upwards in an evaporation process into the clouds, and then condensation forms, and then precipitation, which is the rain coming down, right. I think there's something a bit off about that, right, because as you see, the sun there, right, there's the sun, but there's no mention of the moon, right. Basically, I'm thinking that the moon plays a lot more of a part in it than the sun, right, because obviously, as we know, the sun is a fire body, and the moon is basically a water body, which often is in a crystallized form or ice, right? So it's a large water body in the sky. So this type of idea of the air, the water is sucked up type of thing out of off the ground, right? Or our, let's say, like what they call Earth surface is ground level, right? And they're basically saying that heat from the sun, so mention of the sun turns moisture from plants and leaves, as well as oceans, lakes and rivers, into water vapor, disappears into the air, right? Now that seems like a bit funny, I mean, like, surely there's a more straightforward, like, way of doing it. For nature is always, like, very straightforward, right? It doesn't make sense that the water that comes down has to go back up, right, in order to come down again. To me, right? I would say that the moon plays a major part in where rain comes from, right? So no mention of the moon whatsoever in the concept of rain, right? Of course, these are the same people who are basically telling you, right, that the moon is an inanimate rock in the sky, right? Of course, tying in with their total hex about man landing on the moon and walking about on the moon, where it was an inanimate rock. See, so it's this is tying in with that. Yeah, we was seen mention of the moon, affecting rainfall. And apparently, when the moon rises, it creates a bulge in the Earth's atmosphere. Again, this is basically complicating things, in a way which is unneeded, right? And again, you're back to the clouds holding the moisture idea, right? Of course, in this, it's basically saying that like it's well known in sort of sailor, circles, that the moon is it sort of governs the tides of the sea and all this. It's an old sailing practice. The old sailors of their ships and boats used to, gone by the moon. It was known to govern the seas and tides and all that, right? What they're saying here, when the satellite, they're calling the moon a satellite, right? Which it isn't, right? But yeah, it's gravitational attraction, right? Now, there might be something to that, right? But what I'm thinking is, right? And there's some more sort of BS. It's raining on the moon, NASA discovered, like, right? What I'm basically thinking is that to get the sort of like the gravitational satellite ideas and all this, right? What I'm thinking is just basically when it rains, right? It's because that moisture, that water, is coming directly from the moon, right? Which is a water body. So, say it's frozen, right? Say it's frozen, and it melts. So the temperatures warm up and it melts, right? Then that water's obviously got to fall downwards, right? And that's when it could, fall into the atmosphere, if you like, of our ground surface, like where we are, type of thing. Obviously call it Earth, right? And that's what I'm thinking, that the water comes directly from the moon, right? And just falls to Earth, type of thing, right? Which sort of, makes a lot more sense than this type of process of evaporation and condensation and precipitation and all this, right? I mean, here you go. This is just total drivel. Like, this is total lies. At the center in the moon's dense metallic core, the core is largely composed of iron and some nickel. The inner core is a solid mass. I mean, that's like total garbage. Absolute lie. Right? They've never been. They've never been on it. So how the hell are you meant to know what's in the moon's core? It hasn't got a core to start. It's like a sort of lake of water type of thing. Right? So as you see, a lot of their lies about it. Right? Moon halos are used to forecast weather. Right? There's probably a bit of their coded truth in some ideas about this, the moon man, right? Because so as you see here, this is the moon, obviously a photograph, and these spots are basically the darker bits where it's less frozen, right? And these parts here where it looks more solid, right? And it's sort of crystallizing in the same way that like a glass of water would, or near like a pond or anything like that. Water sort of crystallizes and forms that type of structure. Like when it turns into ice, right? And so when you have, say for example, right, you wanted to predict weather, right? It would be, say you could have powerful telescopes, right, observing the moon from certain positions, right? It wouldn't be seen from everywhere, right? But from certain positions, like let's say they set up weather stations or something like that, right? They could observe the moon, right? And then when they see that there's the temperature changes on the moon, like for example, some melting, right? Some melting on it. Then from that point, right, they can observe the melting type of thing. They can see with a very powerful telescope the moisture leaving the moon, right, going into the, dropping off the moon basically, right? Then from there they can predict future rain patterns, right? So obviously they would say things like, obviously they've learned by now through observation how long it takes for some rain to go from the moon, right, down to this place, Earth, right? It may take, like, it may be fairly immediate, right, like within a few hours, right? Or it may take like days, like say a few days, or it may take even weeks, right? Obviously they would know by constant observation how long that would take, right? Of course this BS here, it doesn't rain and the moon doesn't have atmosphere, so it doesn't rain. In fact, it's a pretty hostile place where, it's like, yeah, it's a lake of water basically, you know what I mean? So it's like hostile in the way, aye. Of course, this is all BS, like the stuff they're putting on about it. The moon's phases affect rainfall, right? But what I'm saying basically is that the moon directly is the giver of rain, right? The direct bringer of rain. You know, the moon creates rain, right? Like the sun creates, say, fire and heat. The moon creates, what it's made of. Again, water. See what I'm saying? So we have these idea of weather stations, right? And obviously, what are they doing exactly in the weather stations? Like, how exactly do they, like predict and forecast weather? And it's got to be some basically very simple secret to it. You know what I mean? And they rainfall, air temperature, and all this type of stuff, right? But as I'm saying, right, if you was to observe the moon, right, um, like I say, with a very powerful scope, you could basically see when water was coming off, right, and therefore predict when rainfall would hit our plane or whatever you call it, right? And you would know by the directions of where it came off and where it was headed down and all that. So they could predict like where they were going to have rainy weather in certain parts of the world and all that, right? Of course, you wouldn't be able to see it from everywhere, but just from specific points. So like this idea of weather stations. You always see that basically seeing the moon is made of igneous rock, right? The idea of being an inanimate rock floating in space, it's just a complete lie, right? Of course, that moon rock idea that where basically taking back lumps of rock, originating from the surface of the moon. Again, this is just basically complete lies, really. Absolute lies, So, if this moon rock was auctioned, whoever bought it was totally ripped off. But of course, it would have been a total hex anyway. The bloke buying the stock would have been, in on the hex and all, right? Just all assure for the older people to look at, right? Of course, total BS, right? It's got a geology, you see, it's got a geology according to these where, absolute BS. It's one large sort of water body, right? Which mainly appears as ice from where we are, like, you see what I mean? A space rock. You always see the BS about the America's moonwalkers, right? David Scott, David Scott, right? Charles Duke, right? Like the Duke of Windsor type of thing. Schmidt, as in Smith, right? Goldsmith, totally quoted, right? 24 astronauts, 6 for hex. I mean, as I pointed out before, look how close the sort of the background is, the horizon, You know what I mean? That's the chance. Plus another thing, what to see is where was the stars, Where's all the stars in the sky and that if they're walking around up there? The stars will be even more visible than from down here. It's a total BS, right? Obviously, one of the biggest hexes of all time, right? Krishna consciousness, you know what I mean? And this one here was the latest one, the Artemis. I've done the what do you call it, anagram on that one, the Artemis.